everyone. I'm Stacey Wilson-Hunt, your host for this episode of Half Hour with Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Joining me today is Francesca Sloane, the series co-creator, writer, EP, and showrunner. I'm tired just listing off those credits for you. Welcome, Francesca. Congratulations on the show.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Of course. How has it felt to have literally the world be watching this thing that you've been working on for a while?
It feels totally crazy and wonderful and surreal. I'm so surprised that people are watching it. I'm especially surprised when people like it. I'm delighted. I'm delighted by the thing. Yeah.
Good. Well, it sounded like you were open to any feedback, and now it seems like it's mostly positive, which is great. That's what we hope for. And for those who haven't had a chance to see the show yet, how would you prime, pun intended, to want to watch? What is your elevator pitch sort of after the fact?
I think it's a show for people who love sort of spy action thrillers, but then also love really strong character pieces about intimacy. Our show is about two lonely strangers that I think anyone could really relate to, put in this situation where they sign up with this mysterious company to become secret agents in an arranged marriage. And despite everything that they wanted to happen, they start actually falling for each other, which makes everything a lot riskier because now your heart is involved. So relatable.
Very good. That was
fun.
Very succinct. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, let's take a look at the trailer for some added value to your pitch.
I'm Jay.
I'm John.
Love and happiness.
Banking card and marriage registration.
Something that can make you do
We're married.
Yeah, I guess we're married.
make you do right.
They didn't bring up that we'd be paired until the last interview.
It's an old KGB tactic. And you draw less attention as a couple.
Very romantic.
What is it that you two do?
We're software engineers. Administer single dose, no casualties.
You think if the company hadn't matched you, you'd be compatible?
You're sitting underneath a shelter I made. I made this fire. I got you this fish.
Shelter, food, fire, water.
No.
Maybe.
Work, life, romance, they're all part of the same project.
You said you love me.
Yeah, you did too.
We're about to die.
So you didn't mean it?
No, I do.
That's cool.
Don't do that.
Sorry.
It's just a job. It is not life and death. Do you feel better?
It's a great trailer.
Can't be wrong with Marvin Gaye.
You really can. I was going to compliment your music choice there. So you, of course, worked with Donald Glover, co-creator and co-star, on Atlanta, which is a wonderful collaboration, I'm sure. And when you were first conceiving this series with him, and of course, adapting and reimagining the 2005 film of the same title, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, what were your biggest fears about reimagining a movie that really was a huge hit, obviously starring Brad and Angelina at the top of their game? But also, what were you most excited about in terms of this reinvention process?
Honestly, the thing that drew us to it was exactly what you're asking. It was why it was a mountain to climb and why that was exciting because it was such a big swing, and also why it was terrifying. And I think Donald and I both really like to sort of roll our sleeves up and get into a little bit of trouble, good trouble. And this felt challenging, and that was exciting to us because we wanted to definitely do something that felt fresh. I feel like the world is really, chock full of these reboots, remakes, things like that. So we wanted to do something that felt like something new and original while still giving something to the original IP for fans that love that. So they still had something in there to invest in. But we were excited to sort of lean into in between moments in terms of an action thriller. What happens when things, you know, between the chase sequences, you know,
Right.
what happens if your character wears the wrong shoe?
I was just going to say they get blisters from wearing the wrong shoes.
Exactly. You know, that was something that was really interesting to us, plus the vulnerability of what marriage really looks like. We really wanted to investigate sort of the ups and downs of what it means to make a choice to truly try and invest in another person.
That's great. And I think you've done all those things, by the way.
Oh, thank
you. You're welcome. And I would love to know, just from a writing perspective, what has been your biggest learning curve coming from a show like Atlanta, which is, you know, very sort of surreal and artistic and quiet, had some action, but I would say it's very meditative and it's very character study driven, and transitioning to something so big with explosions and foot chases and shooting in the Dolomites in Italy and large scale sequences, which is not easy to write and to put on the page. So tell me how you, I guess, manage that learning curve.
It was a learning curve. I think it's interesting because in many ways, this is the biggest opportunity any of us have had, especially myself. And so in that way, it's the most adult thing I've ever done. But at the same time, we got to sort of pluck into the most childlike parts of our brains of like what you imagine big shoot 'em ups to look like when you're a tiny little kid sort of playing with action figures.
Right.
You know, you sort of tap back into that realm of yourself, which was really exciting. Watching a lot of really inspiring work from the 70s that sort of did all of those things in a way that felt really grounded.
French Connection, I'm assuming, was in that.
Exactly. Lots of French Connection, lots of Hitchcock. But then also, like, where do you get to actually make it feel like you earn the popcorn moments where it's truly big explosions? And so the way that we sort of did that in terms of transitioning from the Atlanta world is, how do you take action sequences, but how do you always make it come back to character? What does this do to this relationship when they have to go through these things? How do we see that the relationship has grown from the beginning when they're clumsy and awkward and having a hard time communicating versus when they're on a good one with one another, where suddenly they're doing chase sequences where they're working together in a way that feels far smoother, versus when they are now having fractures in their relationship where they're totally messing missions up. So it always came back to making sure it was rooted back in character again.
And that's sort of where the blisters enter, right? The sort of vulnerability moments, right?
Blisters enter all throughout. That's the mantra.
And who can't relate to that, by the way? I mean, we've all been through, we've all been there. So speaking of exciting action sequences, let's show a clip from episode 1. This sort of demonstrates one of these moments that you had to undertake as a writer and also as a producer executing this large story. So let's take a look.
She's picking up speed. We gotta hurry.
John, are you with me?
Do you have more of those boxes? Like without the logo?
Okay, she's moving. John, can you hear me?
All right, just need a little more time.
What if she's coordinating the drop? Like if she's meeting someone nearby, we need to get this box right now. John.
You're making a mess.
Can I have this box?
No.
What if I buy this? I'll buy this box.
She just ditched the phone. What are you doing?
Jesus Christ, John, are you shopping right now?
Okay,
Thanks.
She's exiting to Broadway.
Okay, she's leaving.
Take the box. She's gonna jump to her left.
Hey! My daughter again, I'm gonna beat you.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
What is wrong with you?
Sorry.
I can only imagine logistically what it was like to film that.
Oh my God. It was so loud. And like,
I was gonna say.
Yeah, our AD is this legend. He's the best. He's such a great guy. This guy Doug, and he used to say though he was like, oh my God, like free texture, I think is the way that he would phrase it. Because
Texture.
in New York, it's just like, look at this, all this noise and all of this craziness, and like,
Right.
yeah. After that day, everybody went home with migraines.
New York, we have to love it, right?
Yeah, no, it was awesome, also, yeah.
One thing I've loved about the show is sort of the Easter eggs that you've embedded that sort of signal to the original film. I guess I rewatched the movie yesterday and today, and it's such a fun movie, by the way. But there's a scene like in the shootout in the kitchen where they use the refrigerator door to barricade from the bullets, like even just little moments, a couple lines of dialogue. I was curious, did you build those into the scripts in advance, or did you sort of think, hey, like on the day, ooh, it'd be fun if we kind of, paid homage here? Like, how did you manage those references?
It was a little bit of both. It was most of it wasn't on the day. It would be like as we were sort of, in production and like looking around at the house. But we always knew from the very, very top of us sort of brainstorming, Donald and I, that we wanted to lead up to a way where the finale felt like the biggest sort of twin to the film.
Right.
And so we just wanted to do it our way in order to arrive there. But we were like, okay, now we've done it. We've set the groundwork. We've done our own thing. Now, how do we do our version of delivering on the actual movie here? And so that was always definitely top of mind.
No, it was very fun when that sort of recall happens. You're like, oh yeah, I'm seeing that.
Yeah. I'm glad that you noticed that and that
Yeah, of course. And one thing I was intrigued to have heard you say is you imagine these characters as, quote, C- students being thrown into an AP course. Right. Which I love. What does that mean for you in terms of the way that you wrote these characters? You've sort of signaled, obviously, those moments of vulnerability, making them feel more grounded. But I guess for each of them, they're very distinct characters, very different from each other. How do you see that sort of coming through the way that you have portrayed them?
Yeah, we felt relatability was a huge component in it, because in that sense, if you start off with these two underdogs and you sort of start seeing them in real time become some version, even if messy and not great at it, superheroes right in front of your eyes, by way of them connecting or by way of them disconnecting, it felt like a story that could really be for anybody. And that felt more approachable. We watched a lot of these other things within the same genre, other shows, other series, fantastic things, but there's always this sort of sleekness. It's always really quite debonair, the way that people talk, the way that the missions are handled. We watched one series, it's a great series, but they get rid of a body in 2 seconds. It's like, and they put it in a, that's it. And in our show, we were like, let's see them having to almost throw up by having to deal with a dead body,
Right.
But yeah, it was really about something that felt accessible, that people could relate to, that you could watch with your spouse and say, oh my God, that's us, in an awful way or in a wonderful way. And then, John was, the John character is sort of this golden retriever who has this idea in his mind of what he always thought being a spy could look like. His dad is this military guy who he always looked up to, who's really heroic and conventional hero.
Right.
Jane's character is sort of more protective and anxious, and her anxiety makes her that much more protective. She's sort of more the cat. Seeing those two come together, they think it's because they want this experience of something great in life. But the truth is, it's really because they're lonely. And that's sort of what you start to discover as the series goes on.
That's great. Beautifully said. And tell me about moving production to Europe. Not only, I think it's episode 3, you go to Italy.
Yes.
First of all, stunning landscape, but again, probably very difficult shooting on cobblestone streets in the Alps. You've really made things very difficult for yourself. So tell me what was the most logistically challenging piece of that storytelling, being on the ground in Europe?
Oh, wow. We had a great director. Shout out to Karina Evans. She came so prepared and so ready for the chaos ahead. Like, she was just so down for it all, which was great. And we had an incredible crew, the best crew in Italy, like just the warmest, smartest, incredibly capable people.
Did you have any language barriers and sort of on the directing?
No, actually none at all. It was such a smooth ride. I wish I could say, oh gosh, this was so hard and that was so hard.
No, we don't want it to be hard. I'm glad to hear it wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, dealing with COVID at the time was always such a
Sure.
pain in the butt. But I'll
Right.
tell you something, rather than tell you what was hard, I'll tell you when we wrapped, we wrapped in the Dolomites. We were all on top of like surrounded by snow. And it's the first and only time I've ever been on set where when we wrapped, every single person, it didn't matter what your job was on crew, hugged another person. Every single person hugged, and we all hugged each other once we wrapped. That's how beautiful it was. It sounds very kumbaya. It was hard, it was exhausting. We were grumpy. We all lost our minds. I felt like The Shining at times when we were in. But it was actually quite smooth. And I think it's because at that point we were sort of a really tight-knit team.
That's great. And I'm sure you went on to have some delicious food and wine after that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I gained a lot of weight on that.
Well, that's the mark of a good trip, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I'd love to talk about your incredibly stacked lineup of guest stars. Really some of our culture's most incredible artists, from Sarah Paulson, Paul Dano, even your father-in-law, Ron Perlman.
Yeah.
Amazing. First of all, I didn't know he was your father-in-law until I read that. What a gift to be able to spend time with the fam.
Yeah, it was cool.
And Parker Posey, I mean, the list just goes on. John Turturro. Tell me who you couldn't believe said yes. Like, who was the dream ask where you're just like, oh my God, it'd be a dream if we could get this person, and oh my God, he or she said yes.
They're all a dream. Like,
they are, yeah.
Like the kid in me, again, I keep going back to the kid in me because I can't believe I do this, but I couldn't believe who we ended up getting to say yes to our ridiculous show. And but Parker Posey, I mean, yeah, she's a legend, and I looked up to her my entire life. And Party Girl like changed my life.
Oh, me too. Me too.
Yeah. So she ruled, and she was everything I wanted her to be and more in real life.
Oh, I'm so glad.
Yeah. But everybody was incredible. But I think she takes the cake for me personally.
That was my choice too, but I didn't want to inform your decisions there. So before we talk more about the show, I would actually love to know more about your background. Were you born in El Salvador, or were you raised in El Salvador? Tell me about being from El Salvador, but also then how did you get to Boston, or is it the East Coast? Tell me about your pedigree culturally.
Sure. Well, no, I was not born in El Salvador, but that's where my grandparents are from.
Oh, okay.
And every single summer, so my mom I grew up with my mom as a teacher, a single mom.
Oh.
And so every summer, reasonably so, that's when she finally got a break from raising 3 daughters all on her own, and then eventually 4 daughters. So
bless her heart.
she would send us to El Salvador, and we would go. She would like go to the grandparents.
Oh,
so every single summer, that's where we lived. And it's definitely second home. It's very special to me. But no, I actually grew up in Philadelphia. I was
Philly. That's right.
Okay. Yeah, Philly. I was born in New York, raised in Philly.
Okay.
And I came to LA for school. For undergrad, I went to Cal Arts, and I sort of stuck around ever since. For a very long time, just bouncing around as a starving artist, taking whatever job I could get before I somehow landed doing what I love to do, which I never expected to happen.
It's a familiar story for sure. What was the first thing that you wrote that meant something to you? And this could be something as a kid, something high school, college, or even as a professional writer. I think we all have like sort of that first essay or book project that, we put on the fridge, or we're so happy that our parents were proud of us.
That's a beautiful question. I was a really shy kid, like easily shy. And I've talked about this in another interview, but I almost had selective mutism. Like I would only talk at home, literally.
Oh, wow.
The first moment where I really felt like a connection socially and to school was in first or second grade. We had to write journals, and then the teacher asked us to start reading a certain entry out loud in front of the class. And I was trembling, but I remember I wrote the story about a young girl who lived alone on a farm. And turned out that her parents showed up one day, and that they were all aliens. She like figured out by watching them through a keyhole, that the parents in the middle of the night took their skin off and they were aliens. And it was a really strange and imaginative story. But I was looking around the room, and everyone was so engaged. And I thought, wow, this is a really special kind of power, and it's power based on me being a total weirdo. So, I remember that really being a moment for me.
And also the reaction and how it felt to know that you had sort of caused a change in someone, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. I think that was the first, and then it kind of continued forward from there.
And you talked about sort of that starving artist lifestyle. And, one of the biggest challenges for any writer is to get their work seen by someone who can help them or represent them or help greenlight a project. Who would you say was someone who was instrumental in getting your work to someone like Donald and getting the chance to get into the rooms of some of these shows?
It's a great question. I genuinely did not think I was going to be a professional writer. I will say
Really? Why not?
I just never, I came from a family with very little money. You just didn't dream in that way.
Of course.
My grandparents were writers, but they were in El Salvador, and I thought I was going back to graduate school simply to have time to write, but I actually was hoping to work in higher education as a professor, because I thought,
Oh,
what a
wow.
great way to be around creatives that way is like,
Right.
if you're teaching a writing course and you're constantly around imaginative people. I'd never thought that, but I won a contest at UCLA. I won a screenwriting contest, which eventually led to me getting a meeting with a few managers. And it wasn't until my rep, who I'm still with, this man named David Katzman, he suggested I should start trying to be in writers' rooms. I thought it's like a pie in the sky dream, but I guess it was not. But then it led me eventually to Fargo. And in that room, I became really close with an incredibly talented woman who wrote on Atlanta, Stephanie Robinson.
Oh,
And
I know Stephanie's work. She's amazing.
she's the best. She's
What We
so
Do in the Shadows too.
exactly. She's so great. And she's the one who connected me with Donald, my
I
writing.
love that. I love that. Was that at the top of Atlanta or while the show was already going on?
That was after. So the show had season 1 and 2, then it sort of went on this little hiatus. So it was during that window.
Okay. Wow. That's it. And I love the idea of just peers helping peers and not being threatened by people and just wanting to help you. I think that's it can feel rare sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think that as much as like I credit my reps who are fantastic, but I do think the majority of my career moves have been from peers and like-minded individuals who are also just your friends. I've been very lucky in that way. And I want to keep working with my friends in that way.
Oh, I love that. It gives me hope for a business that's struggled a lot in the last year.
Definitely. Very true. That's very
And thinking about Atlanta and what Donald and his brother and that incredible team of people created for that show, what did you learn about writing that sort of broke a mold for you in terms of what was possible and breaking convention? And I just think about some of the bottle episodes and how some of them just didn't make a lot of sense, and yet it still totally worked and they functioned. And I'm actually thinking of Stephanie's barbershop episode as one. Just incredible storytelling, self-contained films that I think really have changed the way we think about writing for television. But tell me specifically what you learned and how it freed you up to feel more creative ultimately.
Freed up is a great way of phrasing it. I had never felt more satisfied or more free on a job in my entire life than I did in the Atlanta room, because it really was based on a feeling. It's like, if anything, we could pitch anything and come up with anything. And as long as it made us feel something, that was sort of the path forward. And it will carry that with me for the rest of my life, because even in doing something like a Mr. and Mrs. Smith, which has way more structure and way more rules, I think the notion of evoking a feeling and leaning into that first and foremost is something that can benefit anybody. And I think it's contagious. I think audiences can attach themselves to that as well. So
it's interesting to think of that being sort of a modern phenomenon, that back in the day, the old school approach of not really leaning into emotions in the writer's room, but thinking, oh, this is what viewers want to see. But it sounds like for this team, it was, what do we want to see? And we hope that that's also what viewers want to see.
Yes, and I will carry that with me for better or for worse till the end of time. I think once you have that, you can't let that go. It's just too beautiful. And it's not even feelings like necessarily good feelings. It could be like, oh, that feels really weird.
Or
like
that makes me feel uncomfortable and challenged and
Exactly.
No, that's very cool. And I think it's a really wonderful modern phenomenon that is thankfully taking hold now. And Fargo does that beautifully too. You don't know what you're watching sometimes, but you're like, I know what I'm feeling watching this.
Yeah, I agree. I think audiences evolve and art evolves. And I think that's one of the beauties that we have arrived to, at least, even with all of this TV and all of the streaming. I do think that's one perk is that evolution.
And I have to say, it also reflects more diverse rooms and more women in these rooms. I mean,
Hell
this is
yeah.
not an accident.
I agree. I think that's totally true.
100%. And one last thing I want to talk about with the show before you close this out is the final episode, the huge shootout, the craziness of that final scene, sort of like it's been building to this the whole time. Tell me how you wrote the shootout. And I'm curious, is it mostly just scene direction? See, like, Jane grabs a gun. He grabs a gun. I mean, how are you actually writing this, like choreographing? Because incredible stunts, incredible physical work by both Maya and Donald. So tell me what that looked like on the page and what was your vision for that?
Yeah, I mean, yes, you literally do write those things, but I also want to give, I give a lot of credit where credit is due, and a lot of credit is due and crews in any production, but especially this one. Stephen Pope, it was our stunt coordinator, and he was so cool, and all of the stunt doubles were incredible. So there was a lot of collaboration in that.
Yes.
You know, we would talk with him and we'd be like, oh, this works, but this feels a little bit too cartoony. Like maybe we put it down here, or, you know, again, always rooted in character, even if it's like, even if it's stylized, like Jane throwing the books and saying, learn how to read, a-hole,
right.
all of that stuff. Like it's still rooted in who they are, in a lot of ways. But yeah, so it was a combination. Sam is literally writing it on the page and talking about like, Naked and Afraid blaring in the background and you know,
very funny. Yeah.
Funny, right? And then, but then it also is this collaborative nature with Donald, Maya, Stephen Pope, Tara. Like it was a whole combo.
Well, that definitely comes through, and then having Paul Dano at the end, and I won't spoil for for those who haven't seen, but he really brings it all home with his absurd final moment.
Yeah, totally.
It was not what I was expecting, but it's very, very much New York, right?
It is
the ultimate New York ending.
The ultimate New York ending. That's what we knew. That's what we wanted.
And final question for you is sort of for anyone who hasn't had a chance to watch the show, is there something powerful and that you are so proud of that you want to use as kind of a tool to get people engaged if they haven't had a chance to watch it?
Yeah, you know what? I think that the relationship is very real. And I think the performances that Maya and Donald bring to the very real characters in terms of how we develop them is also really real. Their chemistry is real. And I think it's something that a lot of people will hopefully be able to see themselves in some way. At the same time, I think that they're very specific people. And I think sometimes when you write really specific things, it almost accidentally in turn becomes a little bit more accessible. But I think that they're really, the things that they talk about, I don't think characters necessarily always talk about in shows, especially shows with this genre. And beautiful places, beautiful clothes, beautiful characters, great guest stars. I mean, we're very proud of it, and it's weird. It's odd. It's odd in a way that I'm very proud of.
Yeah, no, and you kind of don't know where the show is going in the best way. And I was reading a lot of reviews, and someone called it a slow burn.
Yeah.
And that really is a great, and shouldn't be a negative piece of feedback. That's a great thing, because I don't want to see everything in episode 1. I want to feel like it's building. And I think you guys did a really great job of pacing and keeping us asking questions, which is sort of the joy. Right?
Appreciate that. Thank you. That means a lot.
Of course. Well, I want to thank amazing Francesca for joining us today and our friends at Prime Video, and to everyone watching this episode of Half Hour With. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.